That was Chief Minister Andrew Barr at the ACT Legislative Assembly with his 2018 budget speech. With me now is political reporter James Fettis. Good afternoon. Let's start with first home buyers and the changes, what really is a big shift in this particular policy.
That's right. So housing affordability has long been a tough topic for the government, and this is really the broadest initiative for that we've seen yet. The plan is for stamp duty to be abolished for buyers who are on a combined income of less than $160,000. Unlike the existing first homeowners grant, it'll be available for both new and established properties. But to do that, they're going to abolish the first homeowners grant, which exists at the moment. The Chief Minister went to COAG last week, got permission federally to do that. They say that this is a more efficient way of actually giving first home buyers access to the market.
A big change, James. Let's talk about rates. It's a perfect lever in there. And we are seeing some changes, more increases, perhaps not though as much as we expected.
That's right. So the government is midway through a 20-year tax transition plan, moving away from what they call inefficient taxes, things like stamp duty, towards a more broad-based land tax, which it levies through rates. If you own a house, what you'll see this year is an increase of around 7% or $72 on average, but you'll see a larger increase if you own a unit, about 10% or $135 on average. Again, that is higher than houses, but it's actually less than we were expecting, something more in the order of 15%. The reason for that is that the government wants unit owners to pay a larger proportion of rates. They say that units can often cost as much as houses and there should be a more even distribution in rates paid. That was announced last year. It was meant to be a 2-year plan, but it copped a lot of backlash. There's an Assembly inquiry into it, some huge increases in certain parts of the city, and the government has decided to extend that to 3 years instead of 2 years.
And you'd have to think this is a smart call to try and ameliorate some of the negative politics that were around that for the many people that live in apartments or want to get into units and apartments.
That's right. This Assembly inquiry that's going on at the moment has called for submissions, and we've heard some pretty dramatic stories from all sorts of people, including retirees who have decided to downsize, want to minimise their outgoing expenses, and are seeing really dramatic increases. So to a certain extent, this does seem like a concession from the government that perhaps it moved too hard too fast.
Well, speaking of concessions, James, what about cost of living pressures? This is one of those topics that keeps coming up budget after budget here in the ACT, around the nation as well. Any good news here?
There are a number of changes, that's for sure. In terms of positives for people, there is some changes to the way that driver's licences will be charged. Effectively, the idea that the government is moving to is if you're a safe driver, you'll pay less. If you're not, you'll pay more. So they're extending a discount if you haven't had any traffic offences in the past 5 years. But if you have, you'll be looking at about an additional $10 or $192.80. But looking a bit more generally at some of these cost of living changes, going back to rates, if you've paid your rates notice early in the past, you've been subject to a discount for paying that early. That'll go, and what that means is the government will get an extra $6.4 million over the next 4 years. When you go to pay your car registration, you're looking at about an extra $18 to $385. Parking fees are up about 6%. That's about $1 more for the most expensive parking across the city. And fines all across the board will be up a little under 7%.
James, you and I have covered a lot of budgets. We see usually a very clear narrative, a focus on what the government's trying to say. This one seems to be a bit of a sprinkling here, there and everywhere to perhaps bring everyone into the tent. What do you think the government's trying to say?
So each year we go to a whole range of stakeholders, people who, have or want to have a say in the ACT budget. And often, we hear people saying that they feel as though they've missed out. And what we've seen this year is that there's a whole range of initiatives. The expenses section of that budget is very long, and there are, sport initiatives, arts initiatives, all sorts of things. But it is spread relatively thin. There's no real large investments for any of those areas. And so I think it really is a case of trying to give everyone, a little bit rather than a lot.
And look, we are running out of time, but give us a quick sense of the debt deficit question. It's a perennial one when it comes to budgets.
So the Chief Minister said during his speech that we have returned to a balanced budget. That's after 5 deficits. We're looking at a small surplus, but we are still borrowing a large amount for infrastructure. So net debt is expected to increase quite substantially. That's to fund a whole range of different projects, of course, light rail, roads, things that the government really sees as having a certain social good, I suppose. And so while we will see those small surpluses continue over the coming years, we are still borrowing a significant amount of money to fund those big growing city projects.
Yeah, well, and we are seeing the interest repayments on that around the $200 million per year mark, and I'll be interested to see what the reaction is from the community on that one. And I wonder if you have a brief sense of what that may be.
Look, it's always one of those difficult things. The government has a very particular line on debt and deficit. You've got good deficit, good debt, bad debt, and ultimately they say that this is good for the community. I suppose it's up for the community to decide. Yeah,
we will keep watching that one. James Hurtis, thank you very much. James and the whole team will have updates throughout this afternoon on the ABC website. You can also tune in on the ABC Radio Canberra, where we'll be hearing from the Chief Minister later in the afternoon, and join us here at 7 p.m. on ABC TV for a full update on what the budget means for you.